Good evening, everyone. Allison Skalberg here. I'm coming to you live from the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, also known as ADDA. We're the Southern region, and this has been around since 1987, and it was founded by Pam Esser. There are ADDA groups all over the state. So there are groups for adults, there are groups for parents. Our group is a group for parents. We are out of Sugar Land. We used to meet in person long before COVID. And then since COVID, we've been meeting by Zoom, and it turns out with chaotic lives and homework and kids and everything else, the Zoom tends to be an easier feat for everybody. So tonight we are excited to be here with Mary Smith from Chaos Free ADHD, and she has an awesome presentation for us tonight. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. Everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording, so after the fact. So I always like to mention that because you don't have to take notes on everything you hear, because you are going to get the slides. We are in webinar mode tonight, so that means that we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're out there, and we do invite you to put your questions in the chat box. From a time perspective, we're going until 7:30 tonight, so we're going for an hour is basically what we're doing tonight. So put your questions in the chat box. We'll get to as many questions as we can during the time that we have together. And just another word on the ADDA organization. This is an organization, it is a 501c3 organization, and it was really founded by Pam. She has an adult son with ADHD, and she just wanted there to be an organization out there where you could get educated, you could get knowledge, you could learn things that might help you on your journey with your loved one that has ADHD. And so there is a membership in this organization. When you guys get the email with the slides and the recording, there'll be a membership application, and I think it's like $40 a year, but they have an annual conference that is very good, and they have speakers that come in from all across the United States, not just in Texas. So you may want to check that out. But there is never, ever, ever an obligation or a push to join this organization. You are welcome to join these webinars free of charge. You don't have to join the organization, but if you ever go to their conference, you'll be glad you did. So having said that, I am going to stop my share, and Mary is going to tell us a little bit about herself and her organization, and then we're going to dive right into the content. Thanks so much, Mary, for being here. And guys, don't forget to put your questions in the chat box as they come along. And thank you again, Mary.
Oh, thank you very much, Allison. I am really excited to be here. And I guess if you want to know a little bit about me, of course, you can read about me on my website, but I am a person that's been specially trained to work with children with ADHD, ADHD, and their parents. I do so in a collaborative environment. I also do a parent behavioral training program. I've been doing this for about 15 years to be able to do what I do. I have over 200 hours of formal training and then about 15 hours a year of continuing education. Just on a personal note, I also have ADHD. I've been married for 33 years and I have 5 kids, 3 diagnosed with ADHD. So, what I tell parents all the time is no matter how chaotic it feels right now, things will get better for you. Okay. All right. So, what I'm going to do is my talk is about 45 minutes, and I have left time at the end for questions. But as Allison said, if you have one that's something that's not clear as we're going through here, don't be afraid to throw it in the chat and we'll take a look at that. Okay. So let's get started. Now, I can't see you, but I want you to think to yourself, have you ever wondered why rewards and punishment don't change your child's behavior long term? Have you ever been worried that if that simple tool, that universal tool of using rewards and consequences can't change your behavior, your child's behavior right now, what's going to happen to them long term? Are they ever going to be able to motivate themselves for non-preferred tasks? Are they ever going to be able to learn from their mistakes? Are you starting to worry and lose your confidence as a parent That countdown to college might be ticking right now, and you can't figure out how to motivate them toward independence. Or perhaps the stress and the dysfunction in your home has just reached a level that you're starting to worry that maybe you're damaging the relationship between you and your child. If you have ever thought or felt one of these things, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. And I want to give you some hope here today because there's a lot of evidence and science to back up your lived experience. Okay? So just take heart. So today I want to show you how to motivate your child not by looking at their desires for treats and trinkets, but by looking at their human and innate needs first. I want to teach you a couple of strategies that you're going to use starting tonight if you'd like to. One of the strategies for how do you build long-term skills like routines, like a morning routine, evening routine, homework routine. And then there's another strategy that I'm going to teach you for use in the moment, right? When that impulsive or disruptive behavior occurs, just how to give that point of need correction that your child needs to be successful. Both of these strategies are going to position you and your child to build your bond between you as they perform in a successful manner. So I'm not going to go over the entire history of ADHD, but it's important for you to know that when ADHD was added to that diagnostic and statistics manual, that handbook for how we classify and categorize different disorders, ADHD was grouped with oppositional defiance and conduct disorder, and they called it a disruptive behavioral disorder. Now, the focus of these disorders is on the individual's behavior outward toward others, not what's going on inside them. And in the 70s, research was also showing us that, hey, negative parental behaviors like harsh punishment, yelling, nagging could actually contribute to a child's disruptive behavior. And so, in response to that learning, behavioral parent training programs were developed in order to teach parents how to change their parenting methods and reduce those unwanted behaviors in their child. Now, the key principles of those behavioral training programs in the 70s were to empower parents to work with their child's teachers and professionals to actually be a part of that treatment team. They wanted to help parents learn how to set realistic expectations and communicate those clearly to their child. This training taught the importance of promoting a conversation between parent and child, not just this monologue of giving instructions and directions. They also wanted parents to start listening to the concerns of their child. They worked on teaching them a problem-solving strategy, and this problem-solving strategy was mostly interpersonal to address conflicts in a constructive way, right? And they wanted the parents and the child to be able to work together to satisfy both the parents' expectations and the child's needs at the same time. They wanted parents to focus less on the pathology and more on the behavior. Basically, sort of, hey, let's don't get tied up in the why the child's behaving this way, but let's just focus on the environmental factors that could be contributing to that behavior. The core element and the foundation of these programs was to use positive reinforcement, where parents were taught to reward good behavior and to ignore or mildly punish bad behavior until it disappeared. In other words, these programs were based on the theory of instrumental learning. This is also known as operant conditioning. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is how we train animals. And this is the discipline method that a lot of parents are still using today. We also, in the 70s, had this battle over the conventional wisdom of parenting between Dr. Benjamin Spock and Dr. James Dobson. Spock was a pediatrician. He'd been around since the 40s, and his central theory was we just need to provide parents confidence to trust their instincts, right? And it's okay for them to practice a more nurturing, affectionate, responsive approach to child rearing. He thought parents should move away from strict discipline and foster more loving and trusting environments for their children. Dobson, on the other side, thought that children were born with strong wills from birth, and they could become rebellious adults if their will was not broken early in life. He viewed their misbehavior as a power struggle that parents had to win. He did not see this testing of behavior as a natural stage of development, which we see it today. He advocated for corporal punishment that included spanking toddlers as young as 15 months old. He viewed pain as this marvelous purifier to enforce a parent's authority over a child. Now, I want you to take a moment and think about which school of thought your parents used to raise you, and how did the way your parents raised you, how has that influenced the way you parent your child? So after ADHD was added to that DSM, that manual, it started getting a lot of attention, sorry, pardon the pun, in the research sector. And this research started this significant evolution of our understanding of what ADHD truly was. Studies showed that ADHD had a genetic link. It was often passed from parents to children, and this supported this idea that ADHD had a biological cause. Research also found that kids who showed ADHD symptoms before 12 continued to have those symptoms when they were adults, and this supported the idea that this early development and lifelong pattern was tied somehow to a neurodevelopment component. People with ADHD often have they often have challenges with things like staying focused, remembering information, controlling their impulses, maybe regulating their emotions. And these aren't just habits, they're daily struggles connected to how their brain works. And they happen in more than one environment. We also use tools like a functional MRI. And when we did, we compared the ADHD brain to neurotypical brains, and we found that the areas that were responsible for focus, impulse control, and managing emotions tended to develop more slowly in the people with ADHD. And all of this evidence showed that while ADHD can sometimes cause some disruptive behaviors, these behaviors are usually the result of an underlying brain difference or an impairment caused by that brain difference. And so in 2013, ADHD was reclassified as a neurodevelopmental disorder. So there's one more thing that we learned, and that was that asking parents to ignore pathology was a big mistake. Because when we asked them to do that, we removed the context of their child's behavior, and that left too much room for incorrect assumptions. A lot of times the parents just catastrophized and went to the worst thing that they could think of. And so what we know now is that the more a parent understands the actual disorder, the better perspective they have and the better response they can have toward their child's challenging behavior. And when the parent's response is gentler and changes, so does the child's response to their own challenging behavior. Now, if we're going to talk about learning a new routine or learning how to correct our behavior, we really have to talk about how ADHD impacts a person's motivation, specifically that brain the reward pathway in the brain. When a neurotypical brain engages in an activity that's associated with a positive outcome or a reward, there's this little area in the brain called the ventral tegmental area, and it produces and releases dopamine to some other areas of the brain. The dopamine that goes to the nucleus accumbens, you don't guys don't have to remember all of these names, okay? I'm not going to make you a neuroscientist. But when it goes to the nucleus accumbens, that acts kind of as a hub. And some of it will come from the nucleus accumbens to the amygdala. And when it does, it translates to this feeling of pleasure or reward. Now, some of that dopamine comes from the nucleus accumbens to the hippocampus. And that helps attribute a memory or a learning to that reward. And then finally, some of that dopamine travels up to that prefrontal cortex where it connects this feeling of reward to the behavior, and it creates this conscious experience of the reward. And this works to motivate that person to repeat the behavior that led to that reward or that positive outcome. Let's see what happens in the ADHD brain. Well, we have lower levels of dopamine. Our cortical mass is not developing as faster, so that means fewer connections. And what this means is that the ADHD brain does not have enough dopamine to carry those messages to the different parts of the brain. And it also has fewer pathways to carry that information about motivation to those parts of the brain. This lower level of dopamine and this reduced efficiency results in this disruption to the reward pathway. The ultimate effect is that this changes how a person with ADHD perceives reward and pleasure. And what the person with ADHD experiences is just a lower level of enthusiasm for starting and completing tasks, especially those tasks that are non-preferred, the things we hate doing. So I want you to indulge me one more technical slide because I want you to see neurologically what's happening here. In instrumental learning, our thinking was, if you consistently reward a person for a behavior, it's going to get easier and easier for that person to perform that behavior. Now let's see. Let's say a neurotypical person, adult or child, this does not matter, does a task that they were signaled to do. Not because they were promised a reward, not because they were threatened with a punishment. They just received this cue. Could have been a thought, could have been an alarm, a note, somebody asking them, and they did the task. Now, if we give them an unexpected reward, their brain is going to fire off this shot of dopamine. You can see it there. Here comes the reward. Bam, here comes the dopamine. Now we're going to tell this person, hey, I expect you to do this same task every day for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to promise to give you that same reward each time you do it. I'm going to deliver it timely and I'm going to deliver it consistently. Now, if we do that, after the first few repetitions, something happens to that dopamine spike. It splits into two. Some of it comes right after we give them the cue to do the task, And then another part of it comes right after they actually receive the reward. Now, if they keep doing the task, a lot more successful repetitions, and I keep rewarding that, later on in the learning cycle, what happens is that dopamine that used to come after the reward comes right after the cue now. They're getting this shot of dopamine before they even do the task. Now, this anticipatory dopamine is very important because this is what sort of creates this chemical reaction in the brain to create this sense of pleasure and reward before we even do the task. And it helps our brain kind of activate and kind of get over that hump to get the task done. Now let's look at the ADHD brain. They get a cue to do the task and they get an unexpected reward. Same thing happens. They get that shot of dopamine. After the first few repetitions of that and getting the timely and consistent reward, we do see a tiny bit of dopamine shift forward that comes right after the cue. But what happens after many, 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 many repetitions and deliveries of reward, we never see that dopamine shift to right after the cue. And what this means is that the person with ADHD never gets to enjoy that little extra boost of dopamine to help their brain engage in this task. They just don't get that help. And so we see this and a lot of other impaired responses or abnormal responses to rewards with ADHD. First of all, you can see it's going to impair the way I learn a behavior because it's not always associating that reward with it. It might impact my ability to change my behavior based on a reward I did or didn't get or a punishment I got yesterday. Sometimes we also see that, hey, I'm going to give you this reward the first 10 times it works. And then it's like, no, I want double that reward. Or I want you to reward me for something I was doing anyway. Right? So we get this diminished return on the rewards. And if we don't consistently and timely give that reward, their performance will drop off. This is especially an issue in a house where the parents have ADHD too, and they have a hard time keeping up with the reward schedule. Hey, am I supposed to give 2 tokens for this? Am I supposed to give a sticker? What am I doing here? So let me just reiterating how our understanding of ADHD has changed. In the 70s, we believed that the child with ADHD was mostly in control of their behavior and that disruptive behavior was greatly influenced by negative parenting methods. We also believed that we, parents, teachers, therapists, coaches, activity leaders, etc., that we could control or modify their behavior through the use of rewards and punishment that we controlled. Okay? Now we know the behavior of a person with ADHD is influenced by the differences in their brain structure, their neurotransmitter levels, and their impaired executive functioning. And it's these differences that lead to unintended, misunderstood, and yes, sometimes disruptive behavior. All right, so if we know what's not working, then what are we supposed to do? All right, let's talk about a different motivational framework. Let me introduce you to self-determination theory. This theory recognizes that humans, not just ADHD humans, have internal motives made up of our psychological needs, our cognitions, or the way we learn and process information and the way we understand our world, and our emotions. And when we satisfy these internal motives, these things in blue, that is what gives our behavior direction, energy, and persistence, motivation. In other words, it's not about what a person gets in return or what they avoid that motivates them to do a task. It's about having these internal motives satisfied. Now, part of self-determination theory distinguishes the types of motivation on a continuum. And those go from amotivation, or not having any motivation, to intrinsic motivation, where a person's moved to act just purely for their pleasure and satisfaction. Okay, in between them are extrinsic motivations, and those are divided into controlled methods of motivation and autonomous methods of motivation. Now, this is what I have to tell parents every day. We cannot, outside of that child, these people out here, cannot create intrinsic motivation where it does not already exist. I mean, if a person hates laundry, they're never going to love doing laundry just simply because we give them a bunch of rewards or we punish them when they don't do it. That's just not going to work. So our goal has to be to move them away from these controlled motivators like rewards, punishment, shame, guilt, because those don't work. You guys already know those don't work. And we have to start using methods that provide them a sense of choice, of freedom, and to increase this internalization of their motivation, to help them find that motivation within. So a sub-theory of self-determination is called basic needs theory, and it argues that this sense of well-being and motivation, those are fueled by the satisfaction of three innate universal needs, that top internal motive. Again, this does not just apply to ADHD humans, it applies to all humans, regardless of their demographic, socioeconomic status, doesn't matter. And when these needs are met in the environment or the process in which they're working, motivation will increase and become more internalized, meaning we're moving that source of motivation toward intrinsic, toward the right side of that continuum. So let's look at this first innate need. It's called relatedness. And this is the need we have to care for others and feel like they care for us too. Kids with ADHD need people who understand the true nature of their challenges and that show an interest in working with them to overcome these challenges. Without this sense of relatedness, their lack of motivation, that we label it, creates this lack of performance that turns into an internal story that says, you know what, I'm all alone. No one understands what's going on with me, and I have no one here to help me figure this out. And so a lot of times when people come to me, what they bring is this list of issues that their child is having, and they want me to work with the child to correct those things. And what I sense is this disconnect between the fact that the child has ADHD, they learn and behave differently than neurotypical children, and they're having these challenges. It seems like there's just no connection there. And a lot of times I will hear parents say, well, listen now, I don't want them to use their ADHD as an excuse. Parents, ADHD is not an excuse, it's the reason. If your child says, I can't because of my ADHD, you need to believe them because this is how they tell you that they're struggling and they need help, that may be the only indication you get that they're open for help. Hey man, I think my ADHD is making me do this, right? And when I talk to the child, a lot of times I'll hear, you know what, I don't think my parents care about me. They just want to know if my homework's done and my room is clean. And that's because that's the majority of what their parent-child conversations are about. You can hear it in the child's voice. They just feel isolated from the world around them. And I'll have parents say, yeah, but Coach Mary, all they want to talk about is Minecraft and TikTok videos. Folks, those are the things that interest them. And when they share their interest with you, that's how they're attempting to bond or relate with you. So the first thing parents need to do is explore possible ways they're not meeting their child's need for relatedness. And you need to find some ways to show them that you're on the same team, that you're here to work to find solutions with them. It's important that you foster that feeling of community versus that feeling of isolation. I think it's important that parents start by learning as much about ADHD as a neurodevelopmental disorder versus a behavioral one. They need to know a lot more about executive functions than they do. And they need to be able to look through that lens of executive functions to determine the root cause of their child's challenges, right? I think one of the best ways for parents to learn this type of information is to participate in a modern parent training class. All right, let's talk about the second need, autonomy. This is that need to experience learning or performing as a freely chosen and volitional act. Now, some parents react really strongly when I use this word because they think I'm going to transfer all the authority to the child and just let them go feral. And that's not what this is. For right now, I think it helps to think about autonomy as being the opposite of micromanagement. Now, some ways that autonomy goes unmet is through the use of strict rules that have been developed in response to the child's challenges. Let's say the child always seems to kind of have trouble getting off of devices, electronics, in order to go do their homework. Well, now the parents say, well, if you're going to have trouble doing that, what we're going to do is we're just going to say you're not having any electronics during the week. You get 1 hour on the weekend. And in these strict structures, parents will often use consequences to force compliance with these rules, right? And sometimes these consequences are harsh and they don't really have anything to do with the offense, right? Like they're having trouble getting off electronics because they don't have a working transition process. They don't need to be grounded from electronics. They need the opportunity to practice that transition more so they can get good at it. And if we ground them for 2 weeks, they have no exposure or practice time to do that. A lot of times parents will use directive language that sounds really harsh, like a command, pick up your socks, make your bed, go get your laundry, start your homework. And then sometimes extremely frustrated parents will just check out and say, man, I tried everything I know to do. They're just going to have to learn to figure it out on their own. Again, with that isolation. And so instead of using these threats and really directive language, I ask parents to give instructions with clearly defined expectations. And in this case, the expectation might be your room needs to be cleaned before you start playing games today. That means bed made, laundry done, and floor vacuumed. Then you let your child give them the autonomy to figure out which step they're going to do first. Maybe they want to start with laundry. then vacuum, then make the bed last. They will have met the expectation, but been able to exercise some of their autonomy in doing that. And the most important thing is when giving your child autonomy is that you have a clearly defined boundary and expectation. Never assume that they know it or that they remember it. And that's why I encourage my families to always write down what the expectations are and have the child write what his process is. Now, I was a baseball coach for a lot of years, and I never, ever saw a child walk into the batter's box wanting to strike out. The last of these innate human needs is that you feel a sense of competence in your activities and your environment. You want to feel skillful in what you do. This need is most often unmet when parents set unrealistic expectations for their child. An unrealistic expectation doesn't necessarily mean you've set the bar too high. Sometimes it means you've given them the expectation, but you haven't helped them or made sure that they developed an effective process to meet that expectation. Or you removed your support too soon while the child was learning that process and while it was becoming a habit. When I'm talking about competence, I will typically ask parents to think about their child's history with the task. Hey, have you ever seen your child complete that task on their own? I don't know, for 2 weeks maybe? And what I typically hear is, oh, they can do it. I've seen them do it. And if I press them, it's like, well, no, I've never seen them do it consistently for 2 weeks. Right? And so I have to ask, if they have never done it, why are you expecting some sort of magic to happen and expect it now? That's what's unrealistic about the expectation. So what I have them do, again, clearly define that expectation. Work with the child to make sure that there's a process that's effective enough to meet that expectation. And then support the use of that process until it's become a habit, until they can do it on their own. Now, how are we doing on questions, Allison? Any questions?
No questions just yet.
Okay, great, thanks. So now that we have a new perspective on motivation, let's take a look at how we might approach behavior correction differently. And let's talk about that in the moment, point of need tool. This reset, replay, recognize strategy is this in the moment tool. This is what you're going to use when your child gets distracted from their intended task, they're being impulsive, or they're being disruptive, right? In the past, we parents may have observed any one of these kinds of behaviors and got their attention. Maybe we yelled at them to stop or then immediately issued a punishment like go to your room. And that's where it stopped, right? We stopped at stopping the behavior. But this reset strategy doesn't end there. The goal here is to allow the child to practice the correct behavior and end with a successful repetition. So examples of when to use this strategy might include, starting to look at your electronics during homework, getting excited and jumping on the couch in the living room, or just losing emotional control because somebody told you no. Now, when this type of incident occurs, the first thing a parent has to do is reset themselves. Just use some basic trigger management, breathing. If you need to tag out with another parent, that's fine too. Or just wait until you're calm yourself. A lot of us have this nip it in the bud mentality that came from that behavioral paradigm of parenting. And we just want to go charging in and fix it. And I'm telling you, if no one is bleeding and the house is not on fire, you have the time to do this. Now, notice you're not resetting yourself so you can just start giving orders. You're resetting yourself so that you can gently guide your child to the correct behavior. Now, when you're ready, you're going to calmly reset your child. I like using the metaphor of a referee. You know, a referee doesn't come out on a penalty just like waving his arms and throwing flags and yelling at the players and stuff like that. No, they come out, they say, here's what was wrong, and then next play, right? And so, what I want you to do is think about using these 3 questions to reset your child. They have to be delivered in a kind of a pleasant tone, just not a mean tone or harsh tone. That's why we reset you, okay? So you could be able to kind of come in even keeled. And we're just going to ask, hey man, what's going on in here? What are you doing? This is going to bring your child's attention to their behavior. And then we're going to ask, oh, well, what were you supposed to be doing when you came in here? What did you intend on doing? This is going to let your child assess their current behavior. And then we're going to ask, well, what are you going to do now? This gives your child an opportunity to practice their self adjustment, their self redirection. Now, I want to be very clear. If your child has lost emotional control, you have to wait until their brain moves out of fight or flight before going any further. This might be 90 seconds. It might be 90 minutes. It doesn't matter. You have to wait. If you want a chance for some learning and some competence feeling to occur, you have to wait. I would suggest you just tell them to go find a place to calm down. I would not send them to your room to calm down because everybody knows if you have to go to your room, you're in trouble. They're not in trouble. We're just trying to redirect them here. Okay? Now, the next step is very important. You have to let your child retry or replay the behavior. They need an opportunity to make things right, to explain their concerns to you, relatedness, and complete the task successfully, competence. Learning does not occur at that reset. It does not occur when you stop the behavior. It occurs at the replay, when you let them replay the behavior successfully. This strategy ends with an affirmation, a recognition that your child has successfully redirected or adjusted their behavior and acted in an appropriate manner. All right, now let's look at a method we're going to use to build routines that include a collection of skills. Examples here might be morning routines, evening routines, preparing for soccer practice, unloading the dishwasher, things like that. So if you have ever learned or used the Lean Six Sigma process improvement strategy at work, the roadmap that I'm going to give you is going to look very familiar. I took that framework and adjusted it for working with parents and children. If you're not familiar with Lean Six Sigma, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you how to do each step. The first thing I want you to notice is that relationship circle touches every part of this improvement method. And this means the parents have to put this collaborative relationship with their child's need for relatedness first as they go through each of these steps. Now, a lot of you are going to think, hey man, what can a 6-year-old do in this? You're going to be surprised at how constructive a 6-year-old can be given the chance. A lot of times they can learn to solve their own problem. It's vital that your child sees themselves as part of the solution team, not the problem. That's competence. So the first step is going to be to clearly define this skill you want to work on. You don't want to use broad categories. They're not motivated. They're failing. Yeah, but why are they failing? Oh, it's because they're not completing their homework. Be specific. Next, you're going to define that expectations, the satisfactory performance level. And at this point, just want you to define the minimum your child needs to do to meet the expectations. And make sure there's some kind of time element in here. Now, a lot of you are sitting out there thinking, well, I don't want my child to just do the bare minimum. They're not doing any of it now anyway. All right, so let's just focus on supporting your child to learn the basic requirements first, and then we will add complexity when they're good at that. Now, in my example, this is a real family. They decided that the minimum success criteria was that the homework was completed each night, there weren't going to be any later as missing assignments, and they did not want the activities to interfere with homework completion. Now, this family, the parents loved that their child was playing soccer. Their child loved playing soccer. And the parents actually came to me asking, should we just go ahead and take him out of soccer? Um, and I said, well, has he ever missed soccer because of his homework? Yeah. I said, did it work? No. Okay, so maybe punishment didn't work. And then the mom kind of popped up and said, well, I won't take him out, but dad will. So they had an inconsistent application of the reward and punishment here too. So next we moved into the measurement phase. At this point, parents, you're going to have to fight the urge to just run in and start dictating the solutions. All right. You don't want to do that. Allow them, the child, to develop the process that they're going to meet. They're going to use to meet those expectations. All right. Everyone's role. Who's going to do what? Who's going to do it when? All right. And then have them write that process down. This is what this family came up with. Now, if the child, they're not used to doing this, they're not sure that they can trust you in kind of going outside the box. So if the child at this point creates a process that looks a lot like what's not working now, don't worry about it, because our goal here is really to kind of bring them onto the problem solving team and to just document what the child is doing. That's all we really want to accomplish here. So now you need to measure the effectiveness of that process. You're going to select a couple of metrics, right? Those are going to come from your expectations. This family picked later missing assignments and was the homework complete. Now, this is an important step because it's going to build your child's awareness of their performance, the effectiveness of that process. It's a visual representation of how well it's going. This is not them judging your opinion that it's not going. Okay? The metrics this family chose were that, and this is what their first week of data looked like. Now, I want to make sure that you guys understand, we're not measuring that it took 5 prompts to get them to the table. That we're not going to measure that they were up until 10 o'clock doing their homework. You can make a notes of that, but that's really not what our goal is. Our goal is to get this homework done. So now you're going to take that data and bring it into the understand phase, and you're going to have a family meeting, and you're all going to look at this data from all different sides. What did you and your child notice last week? These parents noticed it is really hard to get them off of video games and come to the homework table. Highest number of assignments missing were after soccer practice. And it was really kind of funny because even though this child had missing assignments, there was no step about what to do about missing assignments, and nobody was really paying attention to it. So they realized, oh, we got to have to put that into the process. You want to use your ADHD knowledge, right? What's going on executive function wise? This family thought might be sustained attention, the flexibility needed for transitions to come from electronics to homework. Are you considering that historical performance? Right? Grounding them hasn't worked. What does your child think about this process? Here is what was really interesting. This child did not think that homework was more important than soccer because they always stopped homework to go to soccer. Right? So remember, this is a family meeting, child and parents. Now it's time to move on to the improvement phase. This is where you're going to start brainstorming all of those changes that you might make to make this process better. So when they just threw out all of their suggestions, they came up with how about no electronics before homework? Maybe the child's going to learn to look up assignments. No activities until the homework is done. That means, hey, it's got to be done if we're going to go to soccer tonight. Parents are going to remove any control or remove any distractions the child was having. The child really wanted a snack. I don't know. So it got put in there. Now, we're not going to solve all these problems at once. We're not even going to implement all these solutions at once because we don't want to overwhelm our child with a totally new process. So we're just going to select one or two to try. So they decided that they'll go no electronics before homework. They also fixed that what to do about missing assignments and a snack too. So they documented the new process. Now, I recommended that they add a step in the process that reminded the child what was coming after homework, which was their free time. So I put that in there. And then they decided to test this for 2 weeks. Now, you want to use this new process for long enough for everyone to get used to the change. You're going to continue to track that data. And then you're going to have a meeting. Hey, did we meet expectations? And the first time through with this first change, they thought, you know what? I don't think we made it. We made some headway, but we just didn't get there to meeting the expectations. So they need to go back to their brainstorm list of solutions and put another one into effect. So this time they decided no soccer until homework was complete and they were going to go 2 more weeks. Right. Again, they go through this process, document it, run the process for a while, collect the data, have the meeting. Now, after this second set of changes, here's what they found out. The child did miss one soccer practice, but they made it the next week. They also saw that the child was starting to have some more time on their electronics. He was enjoying his free time more at home. This is where the family asks yourself, hey, do I need to make another change? Or is this the process I want to move forward with? This guys decided, I think we're on the right process. We just need to get used to it. All right. And so they decided to move into the consistency phase. And what I liked about what this family did when we're in the consistency phase, we're going to post this process. We're going to maintain the same level of support. We're going to hold the child accountable to it, monitor the metrics. And what I like about what they did is they changed the wording of the metrics to focus on what was more important to the child. The rules didn't change. He still didn't go to soccer unless homework was done. But now they started tracking how many days did you get your electronics? How many times did you go to soccer? Did you go to soccer that week? Right? And so when they rephrased that, the child just sort of had this bright look on his face and he'd bring him in and he goes, look, Look how many days I have my electronics. And so what they did is they ended up writing these in terms of his intrinsic motivation. He wanted to go to soccer. He wanted to play with electronics. So that's all I have to teach you tonight. In full transparency, these two techniques are part of what is taught in my modern day parent training program. If you would like to take part of that as a part of this audience, you can use the coupon code CFF underscore ADA25 for $100 off. Right?
Thank you for that, Mary. This was really, really, really good.
Thank
And
you.
we've had many, many presenters, and all of them are really good, but we have never ever covered this topic like this ever before. And I'm a parent to a kid with ADHD, and granted, we got through the adolescent years and we're adults now. So it does get better. You said something at the beginning that
Does.
I am reminded, and I mean, I guess that there were probably times where I thought, I mean, there's times as parents that you feel like the situation is hopeless, or there's no end in sight, and it absolutely does get better. And I always like to remind families that our kids' brains, they're developing slower than their neurotypical brains. So when you are looking at your kid and they're 8 or 10 or 11 years old, they're 11 years old in an 11-year-old body, but their brain is probably about 8, 9, right? So sometimes we really do have unrealistic expectations. And I know we're about out of
Yeah.
time for tonight. But tell people about your class and how long it goes, and how people get in touch with you. I know that your contact information is going to be in the email that we send out. We're going to send out the slides. We're going to send out a link to the recording, so everybody can have that. But tell us how, if families wanted to engage with you, are you online? Are you in person? Do you work all over the state? Tell us that.
Actually work all over the country. So
Okay.
I have people everywhere. But this is the back slide of my presentation. You'll also get that. That's all the different ways you can contact me. But I work virtually. If COVID taught us nothing, it's that coaching works
Right.
really well virtually. Um, I can't remember what else you asked
Do you
me.
do group coaching or individual coaching?
Oh yeah, let
And how
me.
long does it last? Inquiring minds want to know. And can you give us a
Right.
range of the cost associated with that? I have a financial background, so I always want to know, give us a range.
Exactly.
What are we looking
Yes.
at?
Thank you. Yeah, my mind just kind of
No
left me for a
worries.
minute. So this chaos-free family course, for you, it would be $249 for anybody who has this coupon code. It will take you probably about 8 weeks to go through the 13 lessons. And folks, those lessons are written for people like me. The longest one is 20 minutes. We get in, we get to the point, and then it has some homework for you to do. If resources are a concern, you are automatically invited to at least 4 group coaching sessions a month. And you can bring what the aha from your lessons. Now hey, your questions about implementation, you can bring it to that. If you want to meet with me privately, there are options for that. If I'm just meeting with parents, it's $90. If I'm meeting with parents and kids, it's 125.
And I know
Right.
not for the group sessions, but if
Yeah.
the one-on-one meetings is that typically covered by insurance, or is it out of network or not covered by insurance at all?
So none of this is covered by insurance as written. If you have an HSA, let me know because we can run this. I can invoice you and you can pay it through your HSA. You can
Perfect.
pay for the course and you can pay for my coaching. If you have an FSA, usually that just takes like a prescription from your doctor and a special invoice from me, but you should talk to your benefits administrator. But those generally a qualified expense.
Well, Mary, You were awesome. And yeah, I was thinking, gosh, where were you whenever my kids were little? This is really good information. And I think it's grounding too. It's like to bring you back to center because sometimes you're so frustrated. You don't know which end is up, and it's so true when you were talking about, all people want to have success, all people want to do things right, they want to, they want to win, they want to do well, and it's kind of getting back to that. So just you had just a really powerful message. Our ATA support groups are never a sales pitch for anything. We always want to learn, and we definitely
Right.
did learn tonight. You certainly can engage Miss Mary's services, and you'll be able to reach out to her directly. Of course, she has a website. You can check that out and look
Yeah.
more about those classes. But I just, as a parting note, I just want to encourage everybody again. It does get better, but having a disciplined approach to how you're going to go about getting there. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go about doing that, but you were here tonight, and we all took away something awesome. So thank you, Mary, for that. It's certainly our pleasure. We'll definitely have you back. And it
Great.
was certainly nice to hear something fresh that we really haven't heard before. So
Great. If I
wonderful.
could say one more thing to you
Sure.
parents, look, if you are using rewards and consequences, I don't want you to beat yourself up. It's because that's how you were raised. It's the only model you know. It's what many experts and care providers are still asking people to use. So you just didn't know. Okay? So please don't beat yourself up about it.
For sure. Good advice. Good advice.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful night. Be on the lookout tomorrow for the email with the slides and a link to the recording. And it'll also be posted to the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. We have hundreds, over 500 webinars in planning for special needs on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. So this will live out there as well. So thank you again, Mary. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much, Allison. I appreciate it.
And bye now.
Bye bye.